Mapping the College Audition, a podcast where we explore the landscape of the college theater world and try to demystify this daunting audition process. I am, as ever, your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA, that's Musical Theater College Auditions, and today we've got a show that will move us all and live in you for a long time. I'm telling you, it's going to metastasize to your organs until you all can feel the love tonight. I'm, of course, talking about Ray Mercer from The Lion King and 20 years of it. Such a fun guy and a really great conversation. We get into the longevity of his career, and he takes us to some truly, truly fun facts of both his life and the show. And, of course, we play a delightful game, as you've come to expect. But before that, here we go, your call to action. I want each of you to reach out to us at mailbag@mappingthecollegeaudition.com. That's mailbag@mappingthecollegeaudition.com to be included in our holiday show coming out in a few weeks. We've got some great questions already that are more general to the process, and you are totally welcome to ask more of those. So any questions you have about, how the college process works, any opinions or thoughts you want on it from our perspective, etc. Some of those questions are great. Please feel free to ask more of those. But I also strongly encourage some nonsense, of which we have very little. Most of what we have so far in the mailbag is like serious questions about the process. And again, feel free to get those in. But do you want to ask me questions about my life, about fatherhood, about my obsession with the television show Survivor? Do you want some softball war stories from the Broadway Show League? All topics are open, including questions for our intrepid Meghan. Anyone who wants to know what it's like to put up with me all of the time, how the woman tries to keep me on a schedule. She's a hero, and I think needs to be applauded. So again, that's serious questions. Please feel free to do that. Silly questions, fun comments, suggestions for the pod, guests you love, guests you hated, which guests you want to see more of. Let us know. Okay, enough of that. I hope all of you are gearing up for some really happy and healthy holidays. I also want to give a little bit of love to those who posted that Spotify Wrapped, Wrapped with a W, in terms of like the end of the year stuff. That was so cool to see how many of you had us as your number one podcast. Really touched by that. I think it was almost like 100 people who we were the number one podcast to listen to more than anything else, which I was like, oh my God. And just in general, all of our listenership has really increased over the past year. And I just want to say thank you and what a credit it is to all of you, right? It is your ears and your attention, your ratings and your reviews, which, you can keep getting those in. Nothing wrong with more ratings and reviews. And for those of you who shared it with friends and colleagues, it's such a help to us as we grow our audience. So thank you. Thank you. I'm very grateful for that. Okay, let's get to it. This interview with Ray Mercer.
Hello, podcast listeners. This is your producer, Meghan Cordier. I'm not coming to you with another Lion King pun, but an additional call to action, which Charlie Murphy regretfully left out of this episode. So in the spirit of keeping our host in line, I'm dropping my own line to say we have officially launched our own Instagram feed. For exclusive podcast content, please go follow Mapping the College Audition. That is Mapping the College Audition. This will be a direct line to Charlie and I in all things podcast, so feel free to DM us those mailbag questions that you may have and want to include on our New Year's Eve episode. And we have some fun stuff up there already, so please pause this episode and click that follow button. I'm waiting. Alrighty, back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Well, we are so excited to have Ray Mercer on the pod. Ray is an actor, dancer, choreographer. He started his dance training at the University of New Orleans, where he has a BA in psychology. He spent 2 years on the national tour of The Lion King before becoming, wait for it, a 20-year veteran cast member of the Broadway production. As a choreographer, he's worked with all kinds of dance companies all over the country, including some fun stuff like the Harlem Globetrotters, which is not a dance company, but I think it's cool that he worked for them. And he's won awards like the 2012 Joffrey Ballet Choreographers of Color Award. He's a 5-time winner of Broadway's Gypsy of the Year Award for Best On-Stage Performance and the most celebrated choreographer at BCEFA's annual fundraising events, which is what Elizabeth immediately commented on when I said, we're going to have Ray on the pod. She's like, oh my God, he's like legendary at the Broadway Cares.
Oh my God.
So I'm like, we love it. Ray, welcome on the pod. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm great. I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I want to take you all the way back, and I don't
Okay.
say all the way back to age you in any way, but let's say you're 16, 17, and
Okay.
you're thinking about this process. And we've dropped some numbers so they know it's at least 20 years of a Broadway career, so they can just do
Okay.
a little bit of math. Um, but when you were thinking about this and what you were envisioning of this dream of where you were going, what did that look like to 16, 17-year-old Ray as you maybe first started thinking about college?
Okay. First of all, Charlie, the 16, 17-year-old Ray was all over the place. I was born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska, in the Midwest. And fun fact, I was going to be a gymnast. I was on my way, I was training to be in the
Huh,
Olympics. So I started out as a gymnast in junior high and high school. I eventually, 17, as a matter of fact, bringing up 16, 17, a friend of mine took me to a dance class. And that
uh-huh.
one singular dance class, I absolutely fell in love with dance. So,
That's the first dance class at 17 you'd never taken as a
no
child, any
dance
kind of dance class.
class whatsoever. You
Unbelievable.
know, I would bebop around the house all the time, but it was that was my first formal training,
Mhm.
and it was a small studio too. I was 17-year-old, and I was as, taking classes with a bunch of 9-year-olds in pink tutus.
And you're crushing them. You're like, "You 9-year-old, I'm doing much better than you. Come on.
Right.
I know all this stuff."
But she told me if I continued to come that she would give me free classes. So
Hmm.
17 years old was my very first formal training and introduction to dance. Um, but my parents didn't have very much money, so I had to pay my way through college. Through
Uh-huh.
scholarships, and it started off with I had some gymnastics scholarships. And full disclosure, I did a year at the University of Nebraska,
Mhm.
and the only way that I could, even fathom paying through college was to be a cheerleader. So I was a cheerleader so I could get a scholarship.
Heck, yes.
I spent a year there, and then I eventually ended up at the University of New Orleans.
So, and where does the beginning of like I think so I mean, obviously gymnast to some extent is a performer already, but as
Right.
you're going, I have these performance skills and these obviously athletic skills that you still use today. When did it start thinking like, "Hey, I might be able to use this professionally as a performer?" Like, whatever that looked like, it could be Cirque du Soleil or it could be but when did you start thinking, "Hey, I think I could get, paid to perform and have people watch me?"
That is a fantastic question. Charlie, it clicked very early on for me because of, my gymnastic training. So dance came very easy to me, the
Mhm.
flexibility, the strength. I just had to make sure that I got the formal training. And I knew probably my freshman, sophomore year in college, I knew that I, although I was pursuing my degree in psychology, I knew for a fact early on that I was going to be a dancer. I knew it.
Hmm.
That it came. I hate to say it like this, but my psychology degree was always secondary. I would do my
Yeah,
homework and then go straight to dance.
totally.
I minored in dance when I was at the University of New Orleans because they didn't have a dance major. So I
Mhm.
got my degree in psychology and just pursued my career in dance.
And then what about, so many of our students are like thinking about, okay, I want to be a triple threat. I need to be an incredible actor, incredible singer, incredible dancer, right? They're kind of trying to work toward all of those disciplines. What about those aspects of perform? Like, did you think, hey, if I'm going to be a dancer, I also need to take some acting classes. I also need to be able to sing. Like, what elements of that were relevant as you were thinking about, hey, I might want to be a Broadway dancer?
Yeah, you know what? It's especially nowadays. You see so many talented young performers who are doing all three very well. But my concentration was dance, and it
Hmm.
just so happened that Lion King. When you audition for Lion King, they are specifically looking for trained dancers.
Hmm.
That's exactly what they're looking for. So, but my advice to musical theater, the musical theater programs are fantastic nowadays. That they make sure that you're getting all the training that you need in dance, and acting, and also the vocal skills. I spent a whole lot of time in universities, and I spent some time in the theater programs and training the young dancers there. They are phenomenal. They're
Hmm.
making sure that they really are prepared for if they decide to pursue a career in theater, that they're really prepared.
And you mentioned your parents didn't have a lot of money. What was their experience of, as you said, like, hey, I think I might want to be a performer. I might want to be a dancer. I might want to make this living. And what were they like? Get that degree in psychology. We don't know how that's going to work. Or are they like, no, we're totally for it. If you can figure it out. How
Yeah,
were they sort of supportive?
yeah,
If
they
not.
were. I think growing up in Nebraska, they really there wasn't a lot of, especially people of color that were doing anything like I was doing. So it was
Hmm.
kind of, it was kind of, I guess it was kind of odd to them, but they read my passion. They knew how passionate I was about it, and they've been supportive of it, from the very beginning. Maybe not understood it, but
Uh-huh.
they were very very supportive.
And okay, so now you graduate from school, you've got your, well-worn minor in dance, you've got your BA in psychology. So tell me a little bit about, so now you're going to take this journey and eventually end up in the national tour and then eventually Broadway company of Lion King. Talk to me about those first couple of years out of school as you're figuring it out.
Okay. Okay. Fun fact. Here's another fun fact. I graduated. Once I graduated from, I was in New Orleans and I had no money and I had student loans and I said, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" And
A
and
cheerleader, a different kind of
I
cheerleader.
right, and then I cheered for the New Orleans Saints too as a professional cheerleader too. But that
Is
was
that actually
all.
true? I was totally guessing, right? I was a
No,
complete
no,
guess.
no,
I was
no.
joking.
I did that as
Heck
soon as
yes,
I
that's
got
it.
down there. That's the first thing I auditioned
I
for
love
because
it.
I had to pay my way through college. And
Yep.
once I graduated, I I said, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" And my very first job that I ever interviewed for was for a flight attendant, and I
Uh-huh.
strategically did that because I had to figure out how I was going to um, get to New York, get to all these auditions, right? Get to New York
So
and take
smart.
class,
You're like,
get
I
to
got
all
to
these
get there.
auditions. So I became a flight attendant. It was one of the best things I ever did because once I got it, I was able to fly anywhere I wanted to for any
Hmm.
audition. I would read backstage, find out that they were having an audition. I would fly to New York and do the audition, and then fly back home. So it
Unbelievable.
was just the best way to get around, do see the world, and also be able to take class and audition.
That is truly a fun fact. Normally people tell me fun facts. I'm like, all right, is it that fun? That is fun. I
Yeah.
really, that's a great
So
survival job. What did you have to do any other things, or were you mostly flight attendant until now booking this?
yep,
That was it.
I was mostly a flight attendant, and then I was living in Detroit and eventually Chicago at the time. But I was dancing in dance companies. I would get off the plane, go to rehearsal. I was doing
Mm.
that for a long time, 4 or 5 years before I was in Chicago, and we found out that Lion King was coming to having auditions in Chicago. So I auditioned, um, and another fun fact, there was probably 100 guys there at that audition, and everybody knew about it. It was every dancer in Chicago knew about it, and
Hmm.
by the end of the day, there were 5 of us left, and I said, "Oh my
Oof.
God, this could be really real for me."
Oof.
And at the end of the audition, before we left, they asked us, "Could anybody tumble?" And bingo, that
You're
was
like,
my
cheerleader here. We got a cheerleader over here. Come on, let's
right.
go. I can tumble. Thank you.
So
Too fun.
yeah, it was like in 2003 when I landed my audition for Lion King.
And you haven't looked back. Tell me about that audition specifically. So, was that truly a dancer only audition? They didn't make you sing at all. They didn't make you read any sides. They didn't make you do. It was, hey, you're just here for the dancing and then again some of those physicality tricks. Which, by the way, Ray is like the giraffe in Lion King, among many other things. But he's one of the people with the huge 14-foot tall
Yeah,
stilts and all those things. Was it just looking for that, or did they make you do anything else as well?
yeah, and see, and this is where the training, all the musical theater training comes in because they absolutely do ask you to sing. That audition was one of the hardest auditions I've ever done because one, I wanted it so bad, and it was just they wanted to make sure that they had the top dancers in the
Mm-hmm.
country to do it. So
Mm-hmm.
it was long and rigorous, and then at the end of the physical part of the audition, we all had to go sing.
Uh-huh.
And another fun fact, I walked into the audition not prepared as I should have been, and I didn't have, they ask you to sing 16 bars of music.
Uh-huh.
I was not prepared. I sang Happy Birthday.
Oh no.
I did.
Right. This is not advice. This is not
This
advice
is
to the students.
not
Do not walk
advice.
in and sing
Please
happy
do not
birthday,
take
even
this.
though it
Please
worked.
be prepared. And going back, that young boy, I would have been way more prepared than I was. But
Uh-huh.
fortunately, I got through the dance part.
You're not taking voice lessons at that point or anything. Is that something that you eventually then said, "Hey, I'm gonna take some voice lessons, or I'm gonna try to expand this a little bit more"?
Absolutely. Once I got into the show, I had access to composers and singers, and I was
Hmm.
able to take class while I was doing the show.
And it seemed like, unless you'd already been choreographing beforehand, it seemed like also within the run of the show, you got to really expand and now create this choreography career. How does that happen? And we'll talk a little about the longevity in the second half, but it's just like, how does that happen within the context of a long running show? Like you're still performing 8 shows a week. So how are you then able to, be this award winning choreographer?
Absolutely. I always pride myself. I love being the hardest working person on Broadway, and I've been very fortunate where I've been able to have this dual career. Being a performer and a choreographer, and both those things are very, very important to me. One of the advantages that I have is the fact that I have access to anything I want in that theater.
Hmm.
Dancers and composers and wardrobes and carpenters and anything I want, I have access to, and they are some of the best in the world. So I am extremely fortunate, and I knew early on that I had to take advantage of that. So I was always getting dancers together. Could you do this project for me? Or
Hmm.
finding composers with music. Would you mind writing this quick little score for me? So early on, I took full advantage of all the things that I had available to me.
And is the show giving you time off? Like, if you need to go choreograph, I saw something where you like did something for Theater Aspen, or I was
Yeah,
like, so then the show's giving you a couple weeks off to go do that?
yeah, absolutely. And because I've been
That's
there for
awesome.
so long, and I've developed a relationship you know, with the company, whenever I ask, they give me the time off to go choreograph. I use all my personal days, all my vacations,
Hmm.
anything I can muster up to make sure that I'm able to do both careers very well.
It's so cool. And then within the show, so how does it work? So that's sort of growth while you're in the show outside, but within the show, I imagine you weren't hired and already were the fight captain, right? So how does some of that stuff happen where you grow within the show itself of going, I'm going to take on additional responsibilities, or do you start covering more roles, or then maybe eventually fewer roles where you go like, all right, now how does that work in terms of your changing in the 20 years of the show?
Yeah, it's funny. I probably 5 years in. I had been there probably about 5 years, and they just approached me, and the person that was fact captain was leaving the show, and they approached me and
Hmm.
they asked me, Ray, is this something that you would be interested in? We think that you'd be great at it. So I did. I've been fight captain probably for about 15 years now. You know, and it's really good because I'm responsible for maintaining all the fights in the show, make sure that they're safe, and we're keeping up with the integrity of it. So yeah, it's fun.
Super cool.
I often forget that I do it. The only time I really have to use it if something crazy happens within the show or somebody new is
Uh-huh.
coming in and we have to teach them.
Uh-huh.
But they first thing
You
they
just so you don't have to show up to fight call every night. There at this point, you're like, we're
yeah,
over
I
it. We
think
know how
they're
to do
good.
this thing.
Yeah,
Stage minute
they're
runs
good.
it.
If they run into any issues, if they run into any issues, they'll call me. They'll say, Ray, okay, we're having this issue, and I'll come in and straighten things out.
Well, I am dying to get into the longevity side of things. So we're going to take a short little break. We're going to run a couple ads, and on the back end, we're going to talk a little bit more about the longevity of Ray's career. All right, we are back with Ray Mercer, and we're going to talk about the length of his career. I always want to make a length and like a giraffe joke together, but I'm just trying to avoid doing that. A long giraffe. But I want to talk a little. We talked with Cameron Adams about, because she's done so many different Broadway shows, for such a long period of time, of just what it is to maintain your body 8 shows a week.
Mhm.
Often we'll talk about, LeBron James says he spends $1.5 million on his body a year. He's like 36 years old. He has to perform 3 times a week. He doesn't
Yeah.
have to do 8 shows a week, and what you have to put yourself through. What are you doing on a daily, weekly basis to kind of maintain your physical health and also your emotional, mental health?
That's one of the subjects I love to talk about because I am very serious about how I there's no way in the world, that I would be able to do this particular show for 20 years if I didn't take care of my body. It's just, there
Mm-hmm.
is just absolutely no other way. Before I had this, I came on here, I just ran 5 miles. I make sure that I'm in the gym 5 days a week. I take classes still. Those things are crucial to the maintenance of the show, the maintenance of your body, so that you're able to do the show. But it's imperative that I stay in the gym, that I have a proper warm up before my show, and cardio is important too. So I take it very seriously. Every day I'm absolutely doing something for my body, PT, massages, those things, so that I'm able to do 8 shows a week for 20 years.
For 20 years. And what about the mental side of it? I mean, so many athletes talk about that it's actually not their body breaking down. It's almost like their will to keep training at that level. They're like, I know what it needs to keep me maintaining at this level, through the summer, through the off season, always, always, always. And that sort of mentally, they're like, at some point, I can't keep that up. How do you keep the drive? And how do you keep the hunger that you ran 5 miles before doing this podcast and doing a show tonight? And how do you keep that motivation up, I guess?
Yeah, it's so funny. You just mentioned off season, that the dancers, me and the dancers, always talking in the dressing room about how we're athletes, but we don't get an off season. We do not. I wish I had an off season where we could rest our bodies, and rest our minds. And the mental aspect is serious. So I have to strategically take, whether it's 10 minutes out of the day or an hour out of the day, where I'm absolutely doing nothing physical, nothing that pertains to the show, nothing choreographically. Whether I have a dog, and one of the most important parts of my day is to walk my dog in the morning. That hour of day where it's just me and him, and it really, I just have to be strategic about how I approach my mental part of it, because it's crucial. If you don't have the mental stamina to get up and sign in and do a 3-hour show, which is physically and mentally draining, then you won't have the sustainability.
Well, we talk about with our students a lot, because they're doing so many things. They're going to school while they're training for college, while they're preparing, and just how you avoid that burnout of, you mentioned you're doing, if I'm choreographing on your vacation days, I'm like, when are you getting your vacation? Like,
Yeah.
when how do you, that's really, but I mean, it's interesting, that kind of meditative hour of what that takes.
And I haven't had a vacation in years. I can't remember last time I had a vacation, but when I do, you mentioned earlier, I choreographed in Aspen I choreographed Jersey Boys in Aspen, and it was such a beautiful place. And when I was there, I made sure that I had time to myself, and even though I'm working, I take those little breaks where I can, have time for myself.
That's what I tell Elizabeth all the time. It's like, our life is a vacation. Why do we need a vacation? Every day with you is a vacation, my love. I want to talk a little bit about, how do you keep things fresh and interesting? And obviously, interesting might be a high bar for a show for 20 damn years. But how do you continue to challenge yourself? How do you, I would think many of our high school and college listeners will have never done a show more than 15 to 20 times ever. And
Right.
I don't know if you've done the math, but I did the basic math of like, okay, if you've been in the show for 20 years, you've done like over 8,000 shows. I mean, depends on how many you missed, but basically 8,000 shows. I mean, I've never done more than 150 shows in a time. Like, I mean, 8,000 is insane. So what do you do? How do you keep it interesting for yourself? Or are you just totally on autopilot up there?
No, it's never autopilot for me. Never autopilot. But and it's close to 8,000 shows that I have done, and through my career. I do all the tumbling in the show, and they did the math the other day, and I've probably done close to 40,000 back handsprings in my career in The Lion King. It's crazy.
Ray, I did some quick math. I've done 0 of them in my life. So that's just we're both good at math. That's good.
It's crazy.
40,000. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's insane. But it's 2 things for me. The first thing is that I am so fortunate to be a part of a show that is a phenom. I mean, there's no other show like Lion King. And to see that out of those 8,000 shows that I've done, every single last one of them are sold out, where you can walk into a sold out audience for 20 years, and it's just unheard of. And
Yep.
that is one that, I never take that for granted. To see the audience, we say this all the time, there are always somebody, at least 1,000 people in the audience who have never seen the show before. They are going to experience this for the very first time. And it's my responsibility to make sure that they, get what they paid for. I always, before I stand up on that Giraffe and walk out stage left, I always say to myself, there are thousands of people out there who have never seen this show before. And it's up to me to give them an experience. And they paid a lot of money. And three things actually. It's my job. It's what, just like if I were a lawyer, it's my responsibility. It's what I get paid for. So, I have to deliver. And three, it's the people. I work with some great people and who are talented, some of the best in their business, and, who gets to go to work every day and play around and jump around and have fun with a bunch of people that you really enjoy. So that makes it easier. The physical part.
I mean, also the cheerleaders get to do that. But
yeah.
I'm just realizing now as you're talking, I was like, I saw Lion King a little less than 20 years ago, which means I almost certainly saw you in it. When I was in high school, I saw Lion King.
Yeah.
Which would have been you. That's crazy. I just was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I guess it's been under 20 years.
Yep.
Wow. This is a terrible segue given the seriousness and the beautifulness of everything you just said.
Okay.
But I just want to know, in the course of the 20 years, were there ever some shenanigans backstage?
Oh.
Were there ever some little messing around, any onstage shenanigans of, okay, secretly while we were dancing, the Giraffe was actually, mooning the whatever? Like, was any of that kind of stuff, or was it all very serious?
Heck yeah. Are you kidding me? Heck yes. We have, there's, without sacrificing the integrity of the show, but most of the fun part is the backstage stuff. The things that we do backstage, we play games. That's one of the things that are so, I look forward to. When you go to work, when you're tired, is that you can guarantee in that dressing room, oh my gosh, forget about it. It's a party.
I always feel like any actor in a freeze on stage is always deadly. Of like, oh no, something's gonna happen. Is there a freeze on stage somewhere? Someone's playing some kind of game with someone. I got caught once. I got called out by a director, and they're like, I don't know what's happening back there, but it needs to stop.
Yes.
Like, okay, we're gonna stop that game. Okay, yep, that's not gonna happen anymore.
And it's usually
not advising this out there.
Yeah, not advising it at all. It's usually that we're so loud backstage. Stage manager will come like, you guys have to be quiet. It's too loud back here. It's too loud back here.
There's a beautiful moment happening between Simba and you're like,
You want to know another fun fact, Charlie?
You better believe I do, Ray.
It was my second year. It was my maybe 3 years. I had been 3 years on Broadway, and it was my birthday. I'll never forget this. And we were at the theater, at the Men's Golf, and they have dry ice on the stage. And back then, here we go, back then, but I guess it is back then. But back then, the dry ice was wet, and they always said, the dry ice is a little wet. You have to be careful. So I am walking in front of 1,700 people. I get halfway across the stage, and my front leg slid. And I was like, my God, this is it for me. I'm going down. So I took another step, and I went down center stage, slid. The whole entire 14-foot Giraffe fell on stage. Here we are, the middle of the circle of life, the biggest number in the show. There is a dead giraffe laying in the middle of the stage. And they always told me, I was like, I'm a gymnast. That will never happen to me. I'm too strong for all of that. I'm laying in the middle of the floor, and because you're strapped in, there's no way you can get out. So a stagehand had to take me by my legs and drag me off the stage in the middle of Circle of Life. And the last thing you saw was my head sliding off stage right. Happened on my birthday, April 5th.
What are you doing? Are you giving jazz hands? Are you playing Actively Dead? How are you embracing the situation?
It was that audible gasp that got me. I mean, I was fine, but when you hear that audible gasp when you hit the floor, I was terrified.
I just love to think there's some audience members think that's like a normal part of Lion King. They were like, "What about in Circle
Yeah,
of Life when that giraffe died?
Mommy, was that supposed to
Oh,
happen?
that's really sad." And people are like, "I don't think that's a part of the show." They're like, I saw it on Broadway. It's a change for the Broadway production."
Giraffe down.
Giraffe down. What's next for you? Do you have a, of course we're still in the show, but is there a big post Lion King? If Lion King were to disappear tomorrow, do you have a dream of what the next big step in your career would be?
Yeah, I do. But Charlie, you got a job for me?
You want to be a podcast host? Let's get on this. Come on.
No, I like I mentioned earlier, because I really have been fortunate to do this dual career. That soon as I'm done with Lion King, and I don't know when that is. I've never picked a date, and because of that, maybe that's why I've been there for so long. I've never, I just said that I
Mm-hmm.
would stay until, as long as I was having fun and my body was, good. I would stay. But when that day does come, I've been a choreographer. I've been able
Mm-hmm.
to network and establish a name for myself. So, I just want to continue to pursue my career as a choreographer.
Your experience seeing Broadway up close as a person of color for the last 20 years, what has been your experience of some of the ways Broadway has or hasn't changed in that time? Maybe
Uh-huh.
especially with the increased advocacy in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd. But I just would love to hear about, what the past 20 years have been, and then what the experience of like coming back post pandemic and how the world has shifted or hasn't shifted as might be expected.
Yeah, great question, and I'm glad you asked it. I can segue with this with a quick story. My aunt lived here in New York, and I was coming to visit my cousin for the summer, and she took me to my very first Broadway show. It was a Tap Dance Kid, and it changed my life forever because I was able to, for the first time, see people doing things that I wanted to do that look like me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's so important, because I think probably at that moment was my decision that, oh, I know I can do this. And if I do it, it will look like that. That was at the Minskoff Theater. Fast forward many years later, I'm on that same stage in the biggest Broadway show in history at that same Minskoff Theater. I can look in the audience. I remember where I sat. I remember what it felt like. And for me to be at that theater where I saw my very first Broadway show for 20 years, it's impactful and it's important. So I think the biggest takeaway is that, especially for young people of color who are pursuing their career, I think my responsibility and the responsibility of my cohorts is that they see themselves on stage. You know what I mean? Because that's the first step of knowing the possibilities, and
Mm-hmm.
and looking at it now, I think it's on its way, and I make sure that there's representation in the front of the room, because that's where it starts with the directors and choreographers and casting agents and all of those. You know, they, as performers and people that are auditioning, they have to see that too. To know that
Mm-hmm.
they are supported and represented. I think it's so important, and I think, to answer your question, the very first step is to see themselves. We have to see ourselves on stage.
Have you seen any growth in the past? I think during the pandemic, there were a lot of statements that people said, we're going to change. This is going to be a big difference. You had the experience of being there right up until the pandemic and then afterward. Have you seen a shift in the past year and a half? I mean, I know it hasn't been a ton of time since we've been back, but have you felt things moving in the right direction, or do you feel like it's like,
Uh,
no, we're pretty much keeping on where we're keeping on?
yeah, no, I do see a shift, and and on a personal level, I know now that it's, some of that responsibility is mine, being a choreographer, and I think that, I try, the best I can, is to lead by example. And yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I do see some shift. There's a lot of work to be done, but it's baby steps, and I think that we are
Mm-hmm.
trying, and I'm going to continue to try to move in the right direction, because representation is crucial.
What about during the pandemic in general? I had this odd experience of following alongside Jagged Little Pill because, it was all about the Tonys. Is it going to come back? And what does this mean? So the cast was certainly staying together, but it was a very different experience of a show of like, will it come back? Who knows? And, there's that whole, you must have known Lion King was going to come back. Like,
Right.
but what was the experience of castmates going, do we stick with it? Or, how did people stay really close to the pandemic? Was it like, I'll see you whenever I see you? Or how did that work for the Lion King cast?
No, we had check-in sessions, even if it was just with the cast members, we would check in probably once a month or once every 2 months during the pandemic. And we knew, at least, through those check-in sessions that everybody would come back. What we didn't know what it would be like, coming back after a year and a half, 2 years, what it was going to do to us mentally, what it would do to us physically, would I be able to do a show after, a year and a half, 2 years? There was always that doubt. It wasn't until that first rehearsal when we were in the room and we did a read-through of the show that I knew that I was, and my castmates, we knew that we were in the right place at the right time. And we knew that it was going to be a rough road ahead, but once we got in there, it was like, oh God, riding a bike. I hate to say it, but it was like riding a bike. And
just
my
like
body,
riding a giraffe.
Yeah, riding a giraffe.
And was it any kind of restful off-season moment? You said I haven't had 18 years, 19 years at that point. You hadn't had an off-season. Was it like, oh my God, I actually get to rest my body and rest my mind? Or was it...
Yes. Oh my God. It was a horrible time for so many different reasons, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was, I had to maintain some things, physically, but having that time off to reflect and I think it was good for me. I know some friends who it was a rough road for them, but for me, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
It's a complicated experience. I mean, obviously it's awful from a nationwide perspective, but I'm like, I had a baby during the pandemic. I'm like, it was joyous. Like it was,
You did?
like this weird, it's like I had a baby. Can you believe it?
Wow.
Yeah, 13-month-old daughter. It's like I'm like, I thank God, because I probably wouldn't have if not for the pandemic, because she would have been in the show. And it's like all this confluence of the way life works. One bad thing doesn't necessarily lead to bad things for everyone, and it's complicated.
Sometimes you have to
Pivot. I agree, Ray. We're gonna pivot to a very special game. I didn't warn you. I often warn our guests.
Oh my
God!
God!
All of our guests get some kind of special game made up for them.
Oh my God!
And this is a very simple game. Sometimes I go really cruel and I make up incredibly impossible games. This is a simple Lion King trivia game.
If I flunk this game after being in the show for 20 years, it's going to be horrible.
It's going to be horrible. You will not get an offer to be a podcast host in the Charlie Murphy Podcast Network. It won't happen if you don't book this. Okay, Ray, here we begin. This is not so hard, the first question. The Lion King, as we've mentioned, is by far the highest grossing musical of all time, with approximately $1.7 billion gross. Pretty good, right? You were like, oh, that's the question. You knew that answer. How many other Broadway musicals have grosses that begin with a B? So how many other Broadway musicals have grossed over $1 billion?
Oh my God. Okay. How many do I have to name? Oh, my heart is beating, Charlie. My heart is beating. Okay, so listen, we have to think about longevity, right? Who's been there
longevity
forever? Okay,
who's been there the longest?
Okay, so it would have to be, okay, these are not my answers, but I'm just fleshing out some answers. So Chicago's been there for a long time.
Chicago's been there.
Phantom's been there for a long time.
Sure
and
has.
Wicked's been there for a long time.
For sure.
My answer is going to be, it has to be Phantom.
Phantom is one of them. Phantom is one of the two. There's one more.
Ding, 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 ding. Okay, Chicago.
And that's a great guess. Those are the two longest running, Phantom and Chicago, but it's Phantom and Wicked. You said it. You said it beautifully. Phantom and Wicked. Because that's a combination of ticket price versus length. That was a really good answer, even though slightly incorrect. Very good. Okay. Here's another. This is going to involve some math. We're going to use that BA and work it a little bit. You are already the third longest running show of all time, behind Chicago and Phantom. Assuming Chicago shutters right after Phantom does, how many years of performances would it take to catch up? So how many years are you away from Phantom in performances?
5.
Oh, it's a great guess. Almost 10. We're 9.6 years. It's pretty good.
Okay.
How many different Lion King films have there been, including remakes and sequels? How many different, this is according to Wikipedia, different Lion King related films have there been?
Okay, so there was, of course, The Lion King. There was a Lion King 2 where Simba did something, right?
Yep.
There was also the one with where Beyonce was Nala. So
That's right.
that's
Black is
3.
king, for sure.
Black is
Yep.
King. That's 3. Um, is there one more? I'm gonna say 4.
4 is such a good guess. I'm giving you credit for 4. It's 5 is the answer because there's a 2019 remake, right? They like redid it in 2019, like half live. And then there's one called 1.5, which I'm like, I didn't hear of this. Lion King 1.5.
What's a 1.5?
It's a great movie.
You know that one? You
Sure
knew that
did.
1.5? Megan knew it, so then it counts. Megan knew it. She says it was real.
Oh my God.
Sorry, it's more geared for her age.
Charlie, they're gonna fire me. I haven't got any of these right.
No, they're not. They're not. You're doing great. You're showing a lot of knowledge. I just like that you captioned Lion King 2, where Simba does something.
Okay.
But the reason I got that answer that was because I looked up this question because I was so interested in this. There is a planned 2024 movie helmed by what Oscar-winning director?
Oscar-winning director.
There's a hint. This is also the director of Moonlight.
Oh, what's his name?
Ray's just quickly Googling.
I love Moonlight too. What is his name?
Barry Jenkins is his name. Barry Jenkins. What are the chances? But also, like, who would think those two things would come together? Moonlight and The Lion King. I can't wait.
Right.
Okay, we're gonna give you a layup now. We've given you some hard ones. The Lion King won how many Tony Awards in the original production? How many Tony Awards did Lion King win?
Oh my God. I always thought it was 11. It's not. I think it's 6.
6 is correct. 6 is correct. When you said 11, I was worried for you. I was like, we're not going to get down from 11 to 6, but you did. 6 is correct. Weirdly, strikeout for the actors, right? We got choreography, costume design, direction, lighting, scenic design, and best musical. The actors got nothing, which is
the actors got
shocking.
nothing.
Really unfair. Okay, my last question for you is for my daughter because she has this wonderful book called Giraffes Can't Dance that she loves.
Oh my
It's
God.
such a beautiful book. Goes at Giraffe, it goes to the thing. It like all the animals make fun of it because the gorillas are doing a cha-cha and and the giraffe can't dance, and then a cricket tells it how to dance and it learns how it can dance. Anyway, okay, this is the question: what sound does a giraffe make?
I know that they have very long black tongues.
Okay.
I don't think they make a sound. I really don't think they make a sound. I know that 2 male giraffes fight with their necks. If you want to tell your daughter that, I'm sure it probably will terrify her. But I know.
So I'll go like the giraffe goes blah,
Yeah.
blah, 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 and fights with the neck. That's what the giraffe's gonna go. I could just do the Ray story of falling down. The giraffe goes Geronimo, boom, and just eats it on the stage. No, I think you're right that from what we looked up, there's like no recorded sound for giraffes to hear. We got to make one up. It's like, what does the fox say? You know what I mean? Like when people are like, yip, 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 we can just make one up. We can make up a giraffe sound for ourselves. Ray, you've done fantastically. I sprung this game on you. You've exhibited great knowledge. You've done the Lion King proud. I promise. In this.
I wish I would have done better.
You did very well. Truly, nobody does well in our games. It's really, I'm very a cruel taskmaster with the games. I would love to just end with a little bit of advice. If you're a young actor listening to this, you're 20, maybe you're still in college, you're just about to graduate, or you're maybe just starting to look at colleges, you're sort of beginning your career. What advice would you give for that longevity of a long career? If you're someone who goes, I want to have that 25, 30 year Broadway career, what advice would you give to that young artist?
You know, there's no replacing hard work. I mean, I wish there was some secret formula where you could cheat and get to where you needed to be, but there's no replacing hard work. There's absolutely no way that you can have a longevity in anything that if you're not strategic about how you work. And early on, and I wish I could have told my 17, 18, 19-year-old self to be a little more strategic about how I went about my career. You know, a lot of things fell into my lap, a lot of things that, I had to work for, but there is, looking back now, I think that if I was just a little more strategic about how I networked and specific about what I really wanted for my career, that probably things would have ended up a little differently, but I would say to them that there's no replacing hard work, that your work ethic will get you everywhere, and to be very strategic about what you want and how you want to get there. Be very clear, with what shows that you think that you might be right for, what
Mm-hmm.
companies you think you might be right for, and do your networking, do your homework, and yeah, that would be my advice.
And what about that same question for, you mentioned a little bit of it, but for parents out there, if you're a parent listener of a young artist who's maybe just beginning this journey, or maybe, again, maybe someone who's already in college and you're going, oh God, they're going to graduate soon. How do I help? What advice would you give? Maybe, especially if parents like your parents didn't have tons of means where they can go, I'm going to buy them an apartment in New York City and help them out. How do you think they can best support their child if their dream is the performing arts?
I think the parents are a huge, huge part of this formula. And I think one of the biggest things that parents can do that it's much more substantial than the money sometimes is, well, the money is important, but much more substantial than the money sometimes is just the support. You know what I mean? My parents didn't understand it. They didn't understand my career or my career choices, but the fact that they supported it and supported my dreams, I think that's probably one of the biggest gifts you can give them. And I think knowledge too. I think had like I said earlier, had I been a little more strategic about how my game plan, being very specific about what I wanted to do and how I needed to go about getting to where I needed to go, things might have been a little smoother, maybe. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that parents too can help facilitate that, you know. But I think number one would be a strong support system because you're going to need it, especially in this career. It's crazy.
Well, if people want to keep following you and your next podcast career with me,
Okay.
where would they best do that? Is it, do you have an Instagram, a social media? Do you want people on the website? How would you people want to follow Ray?
Absolutely. My Instagram is Ray Mercer 5678. Go figure.
Hmm, hmm,
And
hmm.
I also have a website. It's Ray Mercer Creative.
Well, Ray, thank you for the time. This was such a joy.
Charlie, have me back anytime. I would love to come back.
Awee-mbumbawe. I hope you enjoyed listening to Ray. I just found him to be such a delight and a next door neighbor. We discovered, I think, right after we closed up the recording, we were like, oh my God, we live like 3 blocks away. So cool. This is going to be a short and sweet takeaway, he says, before rambling on for 10 more minutes. I'm sure you're all looking at the phone right now and being like, no, it's not that short. I see how much longer you're going to talk. But I just want to echo the sage advice of there's no replacing hard work. I think this is such a glorious profession, and I really love being a part of it. But I have seen nobody succeed without an incredible amount of hard work. I mean, maybe there are some exceptions in the TV and film world of child actors who hit it big and got pretty lucky, maybe, or if they're just so incredibly good looking and they were able to kind of ride a model-like career. Okay, fine. I'm not saying literally nobody. But in my personal experience, I think even in those cases, there's at some point it evens out. If you're not able to put in the work, you won't build a sustainable career. And to make another sports analogy, which we love to do, and I know you've all been missing, this is incredibly true at the highest level of sport. Like with acting and musical theater, there's often a huge disparity in the God-given talent and ability that different people have. If you're 7 feet tall, it's going to help you to play basketball. And some people are born with vocal instruments that allow them to sing in ways that no amount of work will allow others to achieve. But it is always, always about the right combination of talent and hard work, both in your areas of weakness and in the work it takes to maximize your strengths. The difference between the amount of talent, let's say LeBron James has, is enormous compared to the average person, but it's less big than you might imagine compared to some other professional players who flame out in a few years in the NBA with minimal impact. I mean, there have been dozens of the next LeBron James in high school touted since he entered the league, and none of them turned out to be him, right? The same is true with so many successful athletes today in all sports. That's just one example, right? One of their greatest talents, these superstar athletes, in almost all cases, is the ability to work really hard. That is a skill of will. Sometimes people separate skill and will. I like to combine them and say that will is itself a skill. And it is one that is so incredibly important to you in your career. I mean, when Ray talks about going to the gym 5 days a week, still taking classes, and going for a 5-mile run before our 10 a.m. podcast recording, that is absolutely a huge facet of what enables him to have the career he has. Of course, he has God-given ability. The fact that he was such a good gymnast, some of that is of nature of it all, right? But the fact that he's able to work this hard is a huge part of what has made him so successful. And of course, it's important that you work smart and not just hard, right? You've probably heard the phrase that intentional practice, or some people say perfect practice, right, is way more valuable than like just going to the gym and putting up shot after shot if you're just kind of shooting with the same bad form again and again. But with all the advice and advantages you can have, right, even this glorious podcast that you've been listening to and gleaning tons of brilliance from, there's just no way in this field to replace working hard. You got to work smarter and harder in this business to achieve those lofty dreams. That's it. That's an episode. No segue needed. I've decided, I'm making fun of myself because I'm like always like, speaking of dreams, and I'm just going to make it the segue and move on from now on. You want to hear more from us? You subscribe to us, right? Why don't you? You want to rate and review us? I'm not stopping you. Give me a nice little stocking stuffer of a kind review. That'd be nice. 5 stars, and tell me what you think so great about me after you've emailed us at mailbag@mappingthecollegeaudition.com, of course. If you're interested in working with MTCA for help with your individual prep, you can always check us out at mtca.nyc or follow us on all of our social media. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, what do you think a giraffe should say? We'll see you next week.